And on Umber, or like the expert level, as Cook-Greuter would call
Let's
it.
let's let's a lot of people, when
Yeah,
I use the word umber,
yeah,
they look at me a little bit confused because it's not a well-known stage. So let's just
yeah.
briefly let people know. The umber stage is this sort of intermediary stage between amber and orange. And it corresponds with Cook-Greuter's skill-centric stage
Yes.
or Torbert's expert stage.
Hmm.
And historically, I often associate it with sort of the really the Renaissance era in a lot of ways. This
Yes.
intermediary era between the classical sort of dominance of religion, for example, and phasing into the age of reason. It is, I think, in Terry O'Fallon's model, I think it's stage 3.0, whereas Orange is stage
Hmm.
3.5, if I have that
Yes.
right. And it's a critical stage, and it's an overlooked stage. So I have another context map where I'm actually looking at all the different lines of intelligence, and I'm gathering as much data as I can from Ken's footnotes in integral psychology, for example, and just trying to get it all on the plate. And it's astounding how many of, even in Ken's maps that he's putting in his own books, how many of the stages in each of these lines of development is right there at the umber stage. And yet we've never really made room for it. And I think it's important that we do, because we often talk about there being a momentous leap between green and teal. It's a big jump, right? To go from that stage to the teal stage. I think there's an equivalently momentous leap between amber and orange. And oftentimes it's a
It
bridge too
is.
far. But I think by sort of, you know, explicating this intermediary umber stage, this skill centric stage, which is a stage of mastery in a lot of ways, of personal
Yes.
mastery, of self mastery, of vocational mastery.
Yes.
By sort of, acknowledging that stage, it feels like it helps that transition between amber and orange, at least in terms of how integralists might want to create a conveyor belt that's actually helping facilitate people's
Yeah.
natural growth and development over time. That umber stage is really, really critical.
One thing I remember from, so I had an ego development coach some years ago, and he described, like, so first thing he said was like, okay, you know what? So everyone who comes to me wants to, like, I don't know, go to the highest stages, but actually what would be the most useful to our society, at least to the German society, would be to help people move from skill centric to self-determining, or from amber to orange.
Hmm.
Because that's really like where the crucial development right now is taking place, in Germany, at least from his point of view. And because it does so much, and I mean, in a minute we talk about modes of debate, but I mean, so the Umber stage, and that was maybe the second thing he said, was like, when he was at the Umber stage, he thought everyone else is an idiot, and then when he developed a little bit further, then suddenly all the idiots disappeared. Because he was not thinking anymore that, yeah, he's the greatest expert on earth.
Right.
He was starting to come out of his silo of his ideology, because he realized, okay, so I cannot be the expert in everything in my life, so
Hmm.
I have to be more cooperative to other people, and I have to learn skills, so which would still skill centric, but that moves you into this next stage, like the real orange stage, like learning how to be more cooperated with other people, like doing more teamwork, not just like, I know, sit in your ivory tower and think about your ideology and only
Yep.
talk to other people from your own ideology, but actually start to expand a little bit into the world. And this is already so helpful, for a society, because then, I mean, at least you still agree to disagree, so you still maybe secretly think the other one is an idiot, but at least you're cooperating with them, which already makes, a lot of problem solving faster. Yeah.
Mm, that's well said. And and again, that's a perennial tension right there, right? Like, guys, our society is struggling with a particular kind of complexity. And that complexity can only be navigated, managed, maybe even solved by a corresponding stage of development. And
Yeah.
if we don't have enough people at that stage of development, guess what? This problem is just going to plow through our society, and
Yeah.
it's going to be painful as a result. So part of
Yeah.
that impulse is like, okay, well, let's raise the bar here. Let's get as many people. Let's get that conveyor belt working again, so that people can naturally grow into these, into the stages required in order to solve these particular sets of
Yeah.
problems. At the same time, this is something that I think Wilbur does a really good job of reminding us. Ken, one of my favorite sort of heuristics that I got from Ken is, at every stage we have to allow these stages to be themselves, to
Yeah.
completely be themselves, but
Yeah.
always governing from the highest stage available. Now,
Yeah.
there's a little trick there, though, because if you're letting people remain at the stage that they are, which is completely their right and is probably appropriate for whatever level of complexity they're dealing with in their lives, if they themselves were dealing with more complexity, they would probably be, a later stage, because that's how these things kind of work. But if the center of gravity of your society is sort of, down here, and you're dealing with problems up here, it's harder and harder to get governance up here, to get the people that are at the earlier stages to actually select for leadership at the higher stages. I don't like higher, at the later stages, which are a little bit
Mm.
more equipped to deal with that kind of complexity. It gets difficult. So there is this relationship where it's like, well, we do want over time to see, Ken calls it the pig and the python, right? You want to see the pig slowly moving through the python, hopefully, as time goes on, while if we're looking at any particular era, of course, we want people to be exactly who they are, right? There's no need
Mm.
for most people to go beyond amber, because their life conditions don't require, post amber values or views
Mm.
or what have you, and that's perfectly fine. In fact, amber will have a lot of skill sets that people at later stages, green,
Mm.
teal, turquoise, don't necessarily have, right?
Mm.
I don't know how to grow my own food, but my amber grandmother sure did. You know what I mean? So it's like there are unique
Mm.
skills that come with each of these. And I think the recognition is that a healthy society really requires the full spectrum of developmental stages to be online and interactive, not at each other's throat. What we can't have is this sort of widening gaps between stages to the point where the spiral itself collapses,
Mm.
right?
Yeah,
What we
that's
really
true.
want is a well-oiled machine where every stage is allowed to be itself, but they're so aligned in a certain kind, in a natural, organic kind of way, that later stage leadership sort of naturally emerges out of that. We can naturally select for the later stages in order to deal with the kinds of complexity that we as a world right now just really, really need to deal with.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, okay, I'm still looking for that spiral wizard who can do that to journalism.